what so proudly we hailed from the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, what so proudly we o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red blare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Color guard, retreat.
Thank you. You may be seated. I now invite Shelburne Town Poet Laureate Rick Bissett to give some brief remarks and then read a poem he has written for this occasion and to offer some reflections on his office. Rick.
Good evening. Wow, here I am again. Second two-year term, almost under my belt. Shelburne, Selectboard, I thank you. Kevin, Unrath, thank you. Your staff, your support, it's been really wonderful. Quick review, we made it to the 125th in May, 125th Librarian Conference at the University of Vermont, where we presented the Poet Laureate program to all the librarians in the state of Vermont. I've tried really hard to get this program out there, and that was a good day to do it. And Kevin, thank you. We donated one of my books to the, it's the books, special collections at the University of Vermont. It was the first book to come into the new collections with a signed author. We visited the arbors. I went there twice in the year to read to the residents, and they are so very wonderful to read to. Working, we've picked up the pace at the Shelburne Community School. I am now working with 5th and 6th graders every Friday for an hour and a half. The students have come to the principal. They want their own poetry board in the hallway now. They took it upon themselves. They take care of it. They manage it. I've taken the students to Shelburne Farms, to Shelburne Rescue, to the Shelburne Firehouse. And our next visit, we hope to go see Paul Goodrich. I got one more field trip before we work on the Poetry Slam that was dropped last year because the teacher left. So I'm trying to pick that up with the help, the wonderful help of the teachers here at the community school to get that program back in place. Capstone program, we held that at the town hall. And again, Kevin, your staff, I had 5 students that actually got up and read their poems on stage. We had over 50 people that night. And it was just a quick overview of what I've been able to do and where we went with it. I've got a local couple that came to me in the hardware store. They want to take our Poet Laureate criteria. They want to hand deliver it to the librarian down in Thetford, Vermont. So I'm hoping and praying there is some town out there that will pick this up. And lastly, we got covered in Vermont Digger. Kevin sent me the report, the article that was in Shelburne News, where my mug got on the front page. That article did go statewide. So another way to get the word out there that the Poet Laureate program works, and it's a great thing to have in a small community. Thank you. So tonight, I'm going to read the poem I wrote about our Pearson Library, A History. Shelburne Post Office held our books 1888. Books quickly worn and not returned left our town in dire straits. In 1895, at town meeting, it was passed to create a town library and trustees with vision at last. The books were moved from house to house, then on to the village green, once the parsonage, then a store, fitting home for books it seemed. July of 1922, James S. Pearson left a gift, his money and name to be used, hence a Greek revival facelift. 2001, the books would move to what seemed a larger place, but the growing town of Shelburne still needed a larger space. The date, September 29th, the year 2018, a groundbreaking ceremony that would fill our hopes and dreams. Finally, a place to hold our books, a free information store. Attached to our restored town hall, all are welcome through these doors. We come as a community on the 14th of September to celebrate and give our thanks for a day to long remember. Thank you.
Thanks again, Rick. I'd now like to invite Jim Brangan and Colleen Haig up to the podium to present the Colleen Haig Award for this year.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, members of the Select Board, and to Lee and Diana and the good people who put together tonight's town meeting. Shelburne's an inspiring place. This full room shows that we have a community that is invested. It shows that we have a community that cares. I'm here with Colleen, the namesake of the Colleen Haig Public Service Award, to recognize someone who rolls up their sleeves and gets things done. Back in 2016, after Colleen retired after 35 years of continuous professional and faithful service, the Shelburne Select Board put out a call to recognize one of its own with a public service award to present it to someone who, by his or her actions, exemplify the spirit of public service, who has shared their time, talent, and energy for the betterment of our community, who inspires purpose, who drives lasting solutions, someone who makes a difference. 2 years ago, the Select Board asked me to chair the Haig Award team to review nominations for this prestigious award and to select someone who makes a difference. This is an unbelievably humbling experience. Luckily, I had help. Once again, Bud Ockard and Lisa Merrill agreed to serve on the team for this extremely difficult task. Thank you for your help, Lisa, and Bud, who couldn't make it tonight. Your input is invaluable. This year, we had 7 nominees. Before I share their names, I would like to recognize the people in the room who make a difference. Do you know that Shelburne has no less than 20 commissions, committees, or boards. From the Bike and Pedestrian Paths Committee to the Water Committee, our town has hundreds of volunteers working towards a better future. If you serve or have served on one of those 20 committees, please stand up. If you are a justice of the peace or a notary, please stand. If you have served or have served on Shelburne Rescue, please stand. If you have served on Shelburne Fire, please stand. If you volunteer in any capacity in our community, please stand. Let's not forget our outstanding town employees. If you work for the town of Shelburne, please stand up. I don't see the select board standing. That's a committee. That's important, I think. Take a look around. These are your neighbors, your relatives, your friends. Let's thank them for working so hard to make our community a great place. Thank you very much. Okay, on to our nominees. The following individuals were nominated for this year's Colleen Haig Public Service Award. In alphabetical order, those nominees are Esther Aker, Rick Bissett, Peggy Coutu, Paul Goodrich, Bud Ockert, who, since he's on the committee, is ineligible to receive it, but it's nice to get a nomination, and finally, Todd Whitaker. Thank you all for what you do. You truly are making a difference. Now, on to this year's winner of the Colleen Haig Public Service Award. I think almost everyone here knows this person. For one, she's always at town meeting. Take a look around. The awardee, let me tell you a little bit about our awardee. She was born in New Jersey. She majored in Russian in college and has an MS in speech pathology. She met her husband on a blind date in Poughkeepsie, New York in 1964. They married the following year and moved to Vermont in 1969 with their infant daughter and gave birth to their own native Vermonter, a second daughter, in 1970. They have 2 grandchildren. This is a true Renaissance woman. She has worked as a fine woodworker, a fundraiser for public radio, and has even directed the Burlington Discover Jazz Festival. I told you it's a very humbling process. She's worked in higher education and service learning until 2006 when we went full-time at her local business, which has become a cornerstone of our community, a place of good cheer where people gather. You've probably been to a few of the community fundraisers there yourselves. She has been described as, I quote, a tireless volunteer and ambassador for the town of Shelburne for many years. She has been a member of the Shelburne Natural Resources and Conservation Committee for decades and chair since 2006. This work has involved countless hours of monthly committee meetings, site walks throughout town, presentations at select board meetings, articles written for the Shelburne News, overseeing and updating the open space plan, and collaborating with many state and local conservation organizations. She has helped our open space fund. She helped establish our open space fund, which protected hundreds of acres of farmlands, mature forest, and a good portion of the La Platte River corridor. She has shepherded management plans for our town-owned properties, such as the La Platte Nature Park and Shelburne Bay Park. She has convened multiple retreats and meetings with other town employees, committees, and experts to address areas of common concern such as responsible development, water quality, habitat protection, invasive species control, and viewshed protection. She has encouraged the next generation of volunteers by welcoming student members of the Conservation Commission and serving as their mentor. She's highly respected for her knowledge of the issues and her exceptional ability to champion a case with evidence and expertise. She's committed and firm in her convictions, but always conducts herself with diplomacy and grace. Her professionalism and the respect she commands are a credit to our community. Here's another quote. "We are truly lucky to have someone of her integrity and drive to lead our town in this area. Codifying regulations and protecting land can take many years to see fruition. This year's winner is patient and persistent. Simply put, her dedication makes things happen." This year's winner is also one of Shelburne's best champions. Her and her husband's vineyard helped spur sustainable development at Shelburne Village's Southern Gateway and is now a major tourist attraction. Now, in case you haven't guessed who it is, it's time for Colleen to formally announce our winner and present the award.
You know, people ask me what public service is about, and as we saw, there are many ways to serve the town of Shelburne, be it as an employee, a member of a committee, the fire, rescue, all those people. They don't do it for the money. They don't do it because they have a title or letters after their name, and they don't do it for the publicity. And a lot of the things they do are totally anonymous. And I can tell you from personal experience and knowing some of these people that things that they have dealt with, they will take to their grave. So it is with Gail. She has been a champion for the town of Shelburne for more years than I can remember. And so it is with great pleasure that I recognize Gail Elber. You are a symbol of what we strive for: fairness, strength, a great work ethic, listening, and doing. So I am proud to present, Gail, this award to you this year. Bless you, and for all that you have done for the town of Shelburne. Thank you.
I just want to say that all those things that were listed were things that we've done on the Natural Resources Committee, but that's a we. And there are so many other people who have served on Natural Resources with me who take credit for a lot of those things. So I'm really honored by this, but I feel like I have to share it with a number of other people and just say thank you to everybody who's contributed. Thank you very much. I am really honored. And I wish I could speak as eloquently as Rick did. Thank you.
Much of what we will be discussing and in some cases acting on tonight are in the town report. The annual town report and the audit report are posted on the homepage of the town, and copies of both of these reports are at the check-in table if you haven't picked one up already. The town report is dedicated this year to all town volunteers who help keep our town thriving and vibrant each year and throughout the year. With me here tonight at the head table is Diana Vachon, our town clerk. And I'll also introduce the chair of the Select Board, Jerry Story, Dave Connery, the Champlain Valley School District board chair or vice chair, is here this evening, and he will be giving remarks and a report later on. And we also have Lee Crone, our town manager and photographer extraordinaire. Thanks, Lee. I'd also like to thank Mike Ralston and Chelsea Palin from Cucina Antica, who once again put on a delightful dinner across the hall in the cafeteria, where we had the pleasure of hosting 4 of our state senators and Representative Jessica Brumstead for table discussions about things going on at the State House and around the state. We're also pleased that the Vermont Community Access Media is broadcasting or cablecasting this live tonight with courtesy of Emilio Fornatora, Ken French, and Tiffany Boyd. Special thanks to the Shelburne Players and the Shelburne Veterans Committee and Boy Scout Troop number 602. We learned recently, I think 4 or 5 days ago, that the risers that we usually use every year at town meeting had been condemned as unsound and had to be discarded. So we had to, Nini Ange in the town manager's office did a terrific job tracking down available options, and the VCAM risers are courtesy of the Shelburne Players, and the ones up front here are the ones that one of the scouts constructed for an Eagle Scout project and donated to the Veterans Committee, and they were assembled up here by members of Scout Troop 602, and thank them for that. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to see us as well. And Shelburne's highway crew also modified the risers on short notice to make them more usable for tonight. Now tonight, we do not vote on the articles that must be voted on by Australian ballot. When we do vote tonight, it will be by raising the colored slips of paper, green for yes, salmon for no. If any votes are too close for me to call, the result of, we will either vote by a division, which means the ayes standing up and then the nays standing up, or by paper ballot. And I've asked Nancy Baker and Nini Ange to be tellers in the event we get to that. Historically, we've also always adopted a special rule of order limiting a speaker to 2 minutes and not permitting a speaker to be heard a second time until all who wish to speak a first time have been heard. Is there any objection to adopting that rule of order this evening? Seeing none, we'll consider it adopted. Another note is that when a question arises where it can be best answered by someone who is not a town resident, I will ask if there at the time is any objection to having someone who is not a town resident speak for the limited purpose of answering that question. I'd now like to turn to page 12 of the annual town report, where you find the official warning for this part of the meeting. We have 3 articles to vote on tonight and 4 to vote on by Australian ballot tomorrow. Article 1 is to hear and act on the report of the town officers and the auditor's report for the budget period July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2019. And you can find these reports starting at page 38 of the town report. Does anyone have a question about any of those filed reports as found in the annual town report? And if there are any questions, I will ask either Jerry Story or Lee Crone to direct us to someone who can answer that. Seeing none, all those here in favor of approving the report of the town officers and the auditor's report for last fiscal year, please raise your green card. Thank you. All opposed, your salmon card. The ayes have it, and you've approved Article 1. Which brings us to Article 2. Will the voters determine the compensation to be paid to the Select Board members for fiscal year 2020 to 2021? The warned article, I believe, the warning does not propose a compensation for the members of the Select Board. For your information, at last year's town meeting approved a salary for the chair of $1,500 and for the other members of the Select Board $1,200. Does anyone wish to make a motion regarding compensation for the Select Board? And I should add, if you do wish to address town meeting tonight, please stand or wave your hand so Cullen Bullard or Nini can get to you with a microphone so we can hear you and so you can be on VCAM. So with regard to Article 2, is it the will of the meeting to propose any compensation to be paid to the Select Board? And historically, the Select Board has been very quiet about this part of the meeting. Okay. Yes, sir. Good.
My name's Doug Merrill. I'd move that we continue the practice we had last year of $1,500 for the chair and $1,200 for the other Select Board members.
Is there a second to the motion? The motion's been seconded. So the question before the meeting is, will the salaries for the members of the Select Board for fiscal year 2021 continue to be the salaries set for the current fiscal year, which is $1,500 for the chair and $1,200 for the other members of the board? Does anyone wish to be heard on the question? Seeing no one rising, all those in favor of approving that motion, please raise your green cards. Thank you. Those opposed, your salmon cards. The ayes have it, and you have approved Article 2. The Article 3 is to transact any other business proper to come before the meeting, and we will take up this article after we have completed the presentations and debate on the other 4 articles up for the vote tomorrow by Australian ballot, and the review of the Champlain Valley School District budget. That takes us to Article 4, is to elect all town officers as required by law, which are a town meeting moderator for a 1-year term, a Select Board member for a 2-year term, a Select Board member for a 3-year term, a Champlain Valley School District director for a 3-year term, and a town constable for a 2-year term. I am running for moderator. Robert Lake is running for town constable. Robert, are you here with us tonight? He may be out in the hallway serving as a constable. Is Ken Scott here running? Ken, could you write? This is Ken Scott, who's running for the Champlain Valley School District Director. Jerry Story is running for the 2-year term on the Select Board. Jerry, could you stand and be recognized? Thank you. And then we have 4 candidates running for the 3-year term on the Select Board, and I'll ask them to rise and stand and be recognized. Ruth Hagerman, Luce Hillman, Kate Lally, and John Pascarella. Thank you. Thank you for tossing your hats into the ring. That takes us to Article 5. And in a moment, I'll be turning the floor over to Jerry Story, the chair of the Select Board. Article 5, shall the town adopt the Select Board's proposed budget of $9,504,936, of which $7,227,185 is to be raised by taxes. The proposed general fund budget starts on page 13 of the town report. I now call on Select Board Chair Jerry Story to make a presentation on the budget and to field any questions from the meeting. Jerry?
Thank you, Tom. Good evening and welcome. At the start, I'd like to ask you to pause for a few moments to remember family, friends, neighbors, and fellow residents who passed in 2019. Thank you, and we greet our new members of the community, the newborn, the newly resident, and we welcome you. Earlier this evening, we were treated to a very impressive display of virtually the entire room standing, as those who have volunteered do volunteer, and hopefully will continue to volunteer in the town service. Next to nothing more needs to be said, except we are this year making volunteer service one of our major priorities. It's sort of the year of the volunteer. So we can't express often enough or adequately enough how much we appreciate the service of everybody in the name of the town. The budget that Lee Crone is going to respond to and present to you in some detail is, as you know, this year a work of some great scrutiny and difficult choices, allocating what scarce resources we have to a very deep and endless series of needs. We hope that you are prepared to understand the difficulties of the choices that were made. We're open at all points and invite your interest at all times to assist us in that regard. At this point, speaking of volunteers, I'd like to ask Jamie, my vice chair. At the same time, the Select Board team hasn't been introduced. I'm going to do that now. Mary Kehoe, Colleen Parker, Mike Ashew, and Jamie Hines, who is the vice chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening and happy town meeting, everyone. For those who don't know me, my name is Jamie Hines, and I currently serve as Vice Chair of the Select Board. It's truly an honor and a privilege to serve the town of Shelburne as a local elected official. I'm here to offer some brief remarks to recognize the service of my fellow Select Board colleague, Dr. Colleen Parker, whose term ends tomorrow after 6 years of dedicated service to the town, including several years in a leadership role as Vice Chair. Colleen's many accomplishments during her tenure include the adoption of the Route 7 North form-based code, which we expect to serve as a platform for reinvigorating growth on the most heavily trafficked corridor in town, and to help drive future grand list opportunities. Colleen served on the Library Project Steering Committee and was instrumental in helping to make our new community asset a reality. She served as a critical liaison to the board throughout the design and construction of the new building and played an important role in private fundraising efforts as well. Colleen led the efforts to reestablish strong lines of communication between the Select Board and our various committees, boards, and commissions, our so-called CBCs, including regular annual CBC report outs to help keep CBCs connected to the Select Board priorities and vice versa. Along these same lines, Colleen was a catalyst for enlisting youth engagement on our town CBCs to help bring these important views and voices into the policymaking fold. Colleen's son, Ty, was one of the first students appointed to the Development Review Board. Our student representative program on town boards is now a well-established practice, which we hope to continue and evolve to ensure that students are receiving real-world experience in local government, and also making sure that our long-term policy decisions are informed by this key demographic. In the spirit of this evening's theme of recognizing Shelburne's volunteerism, Colleen helped to create and launch the Colleen Haig Award, which has become, as we've all seen, one of the highlights of our annual town meeting, to recognize a community volunteer who embodies the values of our cherished Colleen Haig, our volunteer extraordinaire. I'd also like to personally thank Colleen for her welcoming approach to all new board members and for serving as an institutional resource for new board members. It's a steep learning curve for new Select Board members, and Colleen was always very generous with her time to help get new members up to speed on key issues and to help navigate some of the procedural complexities and nuances of board service in the town. I can personally attest that it's not easy being a working parent, raising young children, and serving as a Select Board member. Family and personal time are sacrificed in service of the community, so a special thank you goes out to Colleen's husband, Craig, and her entire family for loaning us Colleen for these past 6 years. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge Colleen's emphasis on listening to constituent input and positions, assessing the pros and cons of complex decisions, and coming to principled decisions on high-profile and often contentious issues in the face of what were very personal attacks at times. It's important in this national moment for us to zoom in at a local level and to look back at what we've learned as a community about public discourse and civility. We've come a long way in the last few years in terms of listening to one another, respecting different positions, and engaging in healthy public debates on key issues facing our town. And it's important to reflect on that so that we can continue to keep these commitments front and center in everything we do. To that end, thank you, Colleen, for your service and for making Shelburne a better place for all of us to live. We have a few small parting gifts we'd like to present to you on behalf of the community, town staff, and the Select Board. Which we're happy to present offline or here. Well, let's do it here, right? The first of which is a gift certificate to one of our newest local businesses, Misa, which we're very happy to welcome. Keep promoting our local businesses. We need them. We need our current businesses to keep thriving, and we need to solicit new businesses whenever we can. The second offering to Colleen is a donation in her name to the Pearson Library. As I mentioned, Colleen was instrumental in getting the library off the ground, so on behalf of the town, we've made a donation in your name. And the last offering here is a small plaque, which I won't read. I'll offer this to you and leave it at that. So thank you, Colleen, on behalf of the board, on behalf of the community.
So never a fan of long meetings. I just want to briefly say thank you. It really was my honor and privilege. Thank you for trusting me for 6 years, and I wish all the luck to the candidates that are running tomorrow. And it's a big deal to throw your hat in the ring and to stand up here and to come to meetings every other Tuesday, plus more during budget meeting. And I can say after 6 years that my heart is full with love for this town, because as we've all seen, pretty much everybody in this room is a volunteer. And between the volunteers that help this town run smoothly and all the employees, we really are lucky to live here. So thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Colleen. Congratulations, Gail. At this point in the program, Lee Crone, assisted by Peter, is going to take your questions. He's going to present the budget, review some of its detail, and take your questions. Thank you.
Well, as others have stated, thank you all for being here to Shelburne's 233rd annual town meeting. So I'd like to give a brief overview of the budget, the challenges that the Select Board and the management team faced this year, how we landed on the proposal that's before the voters, and certainly answer any questions that you may have. Moving. So the proposal, as the moderator noted, shall the town adopt the Select Board's proposed budget of $9,504,936, of which $7,227,185 is to be raised by taxes. So just in brief overview, again, that's the proposal for the total expenditures, the amount of property taxes that would be needed if that budget's approved, the estimated municipal tax rate, the percent increase on the base budget before the additional warrant articles would be 4.89%, and these are all based on an estimated grand list growth of 0.5%. And Peter, if we could go by this one, if you please. So some of the key drivers we faced this year, and those of you who either participated in or may have watched the Select Board's budget on TV know that fixed and long-term debt was a big nut to crack this year. We also have collective bargaining agreements. We have one in place that represents certain fixed costs, and we are presently renegotiating the collective bargaining agreement for police and dispatch. So part of this is projected figures, what we anticipate and hope we'll be able to bring that in at. And then, of course, stormwater issues. We'll have a brief presentation on that later. That's a pressing issue. And other municipal needs. It's expensive to run a town, and it's a hard thing. And I'd like to thank all the town employees who work really hard to manage our systems every day, keep all of our essential services running smoothly. And the reason you rarely hear about any problems is because the staff does such a great job keeping things moving. So what the chair often calls the nut, what are we faced with out of the starting gate? The big challenge this year was that we were facing a 4.1% increase in property taxes on the municipal side before we looked at another nickel of actual operating costs. The big issue this year, it's the first big year on the Library Town Center bond, both principal and interest. So we're at the peak of that this year. So right out of the gate, even if we didn't spend an additional nickel, we're over 4% before we even get started. And where the Select Board brought this in, 4.89%, representing less than a 1% increase in actual operating costs for the next fiscal year. I think that's a pretty remarkable achievement given the circumstances that we all faced. This is a chart that shows our general fund debt payments. And as you can see, we're at the absolute peak. Next year it starts to drop off a bit, but that represents a significant part of the challenge that we faced, were those debts that we have, as a community, have taken on to keep our community strong. So, just to give a brief summary, this is the fiscal year proposed budget for next year with all warned articles. So again, you've heard what the amount would be before the warned articles. The Select Board's amount here is shown as a bit higher than the $6,300 that was just approved. This includes FICA, so it's an actual number that it would cost the town next year. And that's a very small impact on the tax rate, as you might imagine. Then there's the town budget, representing what we've heard. The Open Space Fund is proposed for a $30,000 line item, and that's a separately warned article to be voted on the ballot. The police department is proposing a $210,000 upgrade, complete upgrade to radio communications systems, and during this budget discussion, we'll have a representative from the department to speak to explain what that's all about and why it's needed and why now. So in total, we have something over $9.7 million proposed. It's a increase per $100,000 of $25.27 if all of the warned articles were approved. And again, that's based on an estimated 0.5% in growth in the grand list, and our town assessor has been remarkably accurate in his estimates to date. So again, just briefly running through the articles. Article 6, which voters will vote on or will be voting tomorrow, to raise $30,000 for the Open Space Fund. And there are currently roughly, as of June 30, there were roughly $121,000 in that fund. This would add to that. And then Article 7, the police radio communications. And again, we have Lieutenant Mike Thomas here to explain what that's all about and why it's important and why they need that now. And this last slide shows our comparative tax rate compared to our Chittenden County neighbors. As you can see, we are clearly in the lower third on the estimated tax rate for next year. So it's a lot of money, but we're doing our best to keep it all in line and affordable and reasonable for everyone who lives here. And again, as everyone knows, if you haven't voted already, Australian ballot voting tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. in the gym at the town offices. So that's a brief presentation on the budget. We're certainly open and welcoming for questions. And again, might be helpful to have Lieutenant Thomas speak to the police department proposal. It's a big number also, but an important one.
I guess we'll do this in order in which the articles appear. Article 5, which is the main budget article. Does anyone have a question or wish to make a comment on Article 5? Don't be shy. And please introduce yourself and ask your question or make your comment.
Hello, everybody. My name is Doug Martin. I live on Partridge Way. Go back a couple of slides. Debt load. Didn't hear that. Debt load. Can you say whether that includes $210,000 that's projected for the police communication systems? Is that shown in this, or do you know whether if the town approves funding for the new public safety station where healthy living is going to be built, is that included in this debt load over the next couple of years, or are those going to be add-ons? Thank you.
Yep, thanks for the question. Those would be in addition to the debt shown on this graph. And the reason is not to hide anything, but those have not yet been approved, so we're not projecting to show those at this time. Just by way of information, if the police department radio financing were approved, we're planning on about a $20,000 payment out of the proposed budget for next year, and then that would be financed over a 5-year time period. As for the Healthy Living Fire Rescue, I'll give a very brief update on that later, but we're not anywhere near a possible bond vote on that yet.
Any other questions on Article 5? Yes.
Hi, Jeff Loiter on Tracy Lane. Are these graphs somewhere in the documents that we have? Those of us whose eyes aren't that young and sat too far back can't tell what those are. Do we have those, or are those available somewhere?
They are in a handout at the back of the room, and we're happy to send it to anyone who might like the electronic
I have the handout,
version.
I just couldn't find it. Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on Article 5? Okay, yes. Cullen in the back.
Sally Martell. Is there going to be a reassessment this year? And if so, is it included in the budget?
Could you repeat that and get real close to the microphone?
Is there going to be a reassessment in Shelburne this year? And if so, is it in the budget?
Okay.
So we are in the process. We've just begun a reappraisal. It will be a 3-year process. The reason we're doing it is that when the state releases figures every year that compare actual sale prices of property or buildings to what the assessed value is, and when those ratios get a bit too far out of sync, towns are required to do a reappraisal. We're trying to stay ahead of that curve and not wait till we have to do it. It's a 3-year process, and it's funded entirely by the reappraisal fund. The state gives municipalities a certain amount of money every year per parcel to help pay for the costs of that. So the costs are entirely paid for offline, off the budget. It's a savings account we've been accruing over time. And just by way of comment, I know it's often a fearful thing. People often fear that a reappraisal will mean that my taxes are going to increase. And that's not always the case. There's no way to predict that in advance. I mean, in theory, if everybody's property increased in value a certain amount, the tax rate would go down, and you might end up paying the same. But there's no way to predict with certainty in advance what the outcome of that will be. But something we have to do, and again, it is being paid for off the budget.
Thank you, Lee. Any other questions on Article 5? Seeing none, we'll move to Article 6, which is the Open Space Fund Article, Article 6. Shall the town raise $30,000 by taxes for obtaining options or acquiring lands or the rights in land to preserve open space and natural resources, any unexpended portion to be placed in the Open Space Fund? Questions or comments? Seeing none. Article 7 is the article asking whether you wish to authorize the purchase of new radio communications equipment for the police department in an amount not to exceed $210,000 to be financed over a period not to exceed 5 years. Lee, is this when you wanted to ask Mr. Thomas to speak, or only to answer questions?
Well, thank you. I think it would be helpful. I think he's prepared to make a brief explanation of what this is about and why they feel it's important. So I think that would be helpful for everyone.
Mike, would you come up to a microphone? And my understanding, Mike, is that you're not a resident of the town, so I will ask, as I said earlier, is there any objection to having Mr. Thomas address the town meeting for purposes of explaining what's behind Article 7? Seeing none. Proceed. Thank you.
Lieutenant Mike Thomas with the town of Shelburne PD. First, I want to throw a disclaimer out there. I am not a radio expert. The person that we had spec this out for us is a part-time dispatcher for us who works full-time for the Air National Guard and their fire department. He set up their system, their radio communications, as well as assisted in setting up South Burlington's. Our radio system right now is 10 years old plus. There are a number of places in town, our mobile radios in the cars cannot reach our dispatch. And even more so, our portable radios when we're out of the car. They're reaching their end of life. Sorry. They are reaching their end of life usefulness, and it's getting harder and harder to repair or find replacement parts for them. Got lost. The radio system was spec'd out at top dollar for the best equipment we can buy. Hopefully buying in bulk, in quantity, we can reduce that number. We operate currently on analog. All other departments in our area, all other major departments in our area are digital. We cannot communicate officer to officer, or car to car. We have to go through our dispatch and have our dispatch go through theirs, whether it's Burlington, South Burlington, into their portables out in the field. So there's huge time delays. It's equipment that's needed. It relates to officer safety and communications.
Could
what? Well, we actually did look for eBay parts. That was on the fire panels. And we're not able to find a totally separate issue. That was another system that had outlived its usefulness. Yes, sir.
Mike, why don't you come up here to this mic, okay?
Once again, Doug Merrill from Mariners Cove. I believe it was last year, there's been discussion of a new regional dispatch center in Chittenden County. I believe there was a vote on whether we'd participate in that or not. As that moves forward, will this radio system be compatible with that, or could we potentially be looking at having to re-outfit to meet some new standard in the county?
Being digital, it would be, and what we're looking at is the best of the best that's out there right now.
Does anyone else wish to ask Mr. Thomas a question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
What's the shelf life? The new communication system.
What's
the shelf life for this new communication system?
10 years. The problem with that is electronics today are like computer systems. They're changing daily. They're getting better and better each and every year. But they put a shelf life on these at 10 years. I'd like to ask Officer Lake, have I missed anything?
Folks, my name is Bob Lake. I'm also running for town constable. So one of the things that I can tell you firsthand that our equipment is putting the officers at risk. There's been several times out at accident scenes, at crisis situation, that I'm standing there with my portable radio up in the air. While I've got somebody in custody, I've got my radio up in the air to be able to transmit out. We routinely work with South Burlington. We routinely work with Burlington. They're digital. We can't talk to them radio to radio. So there could be a guy 25 feet from me, and I've got to shout to him, which is not the safest, or go back to my car, call my dispatch, who then in turn calls their dispatch, who then in turn radios, and the guy's looking at me like, 10 more. So these radios will bring us, get us to where we need to be. Our equipment is out in the rain. It's out in the snow, it's out in the sleet, it's out in the freezing rain all the time. The radios are getting tired. So if we're at your house, you need us, we're there. We need to be able to communicate out.
There's also lack of communications within fire department, police department, and rescue having radio dispatch.
Any other?
Chris Bissonette, could this potentially be a liability issue as well?
Absolutely, I think that speaks for itself.
Any other questions through Mike? If not, Lieutenant, thank you. Thank you for your service to the town. Lee and Jerry, do you have anything else? I think we've covered Articles 5, 6, and 7. Does the Select Board have anything else to offer us this evening? Until we get to other business? Okay, thank you. That brings us back to Article 3, Other Business, which is where we have the last 3 years used to invite the Champlain Valley School District Board to make a budget overview presentation, and I would like to ask Dave Connery, Vice Chair of that board, to come to the podium and make that presentation. And I would note that the annual meeting of the school district was held earlier today at 5 o'clock at CVU, and you can find the school district warning and its budget in the town report starting at page 26.
Okay. Well, thank you to the Select Board for letting me go before other business that they may present so that I have a bigger crowd to plead my case to. Thanks for helping me, Peter. If we could go, you go back. That's fine. So what I want to do, the copies of the presentation are not at the table, but we can make them available on the school's website at any time. I would like to point out, I see one of my fellow board members is in the crowd, Barbara Martin, who's another member from Shelburne, who's in the back row here. I don't think Russ Caffrey's in the room. Are you in the room? Nope. Russ Caffrey is another member of the school board, and as we mentioned before, Ken Scott will be running for the open school board seat, which I am giving to him to run for. It's been my pleasure to serve for 8 years on the school board. It's been a wonderful experience. And I think as this meeting opened, I would encourage anyone to participate in school board or committee or volunteer in any way for our town, because the work is highly beneficial and much appreciated. As they say, many hands make light work. So I'm going to give a quick presentation, I hope, of the school district. As we started, I realized that Lee did the presentation in about 6 slides, and Scott Sevo, who I also forgot to introduce, our lead principal of Shelburne Community School, Scott Sevo, is in the back. Scott pointed out that I had 36 or 32 slides, and I became very self-conscious about that, but then I realized my budget is 9 times the size of yours, and so I can probably do maybe 54 slides, so I'm okay if I only have 32. I promise not to do that. But what I want to do is just I'm going to do a quick overview of the budget and step through all the process that we went through, the goals, what the proposed budget is, what the impacts will be on education in our school district, and talk about the implications and your tax rate, and then just a quick overview of the articles. If we go to this slide right here, you know, it's only been 3 years since we consolidated, and the Shelburne Community School, which was its own standalone district, which sent students to a union high school, which was Champlain Valley Union High School, which was its own school district, which was then governed by a supervisory union that oversaw all the other schools. When we went to a consolidated district, we have one district, but still has these five buildings in the individual towns. So we have Shelburne with 720 students and 146 staff as the second largest individual district. And then our smallest contributing school is Charlotte with only 372 students, up to Williston, which is almost 1,000 students, Heinsberg right in the middle, and then all of those students going to the 1,300 student Champlain Valley Union High School. All of those schools are now governed under one admin and one board. We have one board with 12 members. 4 of those are from Williston, 3 from Shelburne, 2 each from Heinsberg and Williston, and then, 2 each from Heinsberg and Charlotte, and then 1 member from St. George. All students that live in St. George attend Williston Central Schools now, and then move on to CVU. All of this work in this district is guided by our mission statement. I know I've said this many times, you know, these mission statements that companies come up with, they needed to meet a quality process document, so they come up with a mission statement, they put it on a shelf, and then they never really think about it. What I really like about this mission statement is that it really sort of captures all the ways kids learn now, which is completely different from at least when I was in school 30 years ago. We're encouraging kids to learn actively and collaboratively, think creatively and critically, live responsibly and respectfully, contribute positively to their community, and to pursue excellence. There are many aspects of this, which are learning to add, learning to divide, and learning to create coherent sentences. But really what this is creating kids who will become contributing citizens and live in a world that is so different from the ones we all grew up in. Before I move on, I do want to thank all of the parents, community members, and staff who have been a part of this budget process. We started our budget process in well, just as a board, we started in October. The Finance Committee basically works on the budget year-round. We receive input from Scott and his staff, and multiplied through all the district. It takes there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of info, and we really appreciate all of the input that people have, especially parents who come to our budget forums and make their needs known and make their voices heard. We really appreciate that. When we look at Shelburne, it's really hard to put this information on one sheet of paper. It kind of reminds me of Lee's graph of relative tax rates between the different towns. The font is so small you really can't see who the different towns are. There's so many wonderful things going on here in Shelburne as well as in CVU. We have success for the Vermont Young Playwrights Project. We have a wonderful diversity and inclusion committee that's doing great work. We have students that made the District 3 Jazz Festival. We have more students that made the District 3 Festival Chorus in January. There's always a lot of music stuff here. I don't know what the music teacher got his inputs in this year. Is that what it is? No, everything. 4th and 5th graders being awarded at the Choral Festival. 33 students qualifying for the Scripps Spelling Bee, and then our cross-country runners won. I think it was the women's state championship this year in 40-degree weather, driving rain, and just absolutely horrible weather, but they came through with a clutch win. And that's just scratching the surface. At CVU, there's so many things we could list. I would encourage anyone, if they want to see the true wonderful results of CVU, go to commencement at Patrick Gym in June. It's a wonderful day to hear these kids speak, hear them perform, and just see all the wonderful things that these kids go and accomplish in their 4 years. CVU was the home of UVM's Outstanding Teacher of the Year for Leanne Morton as our Latin teacher. We had, I think CVU won all Division I state championships in the fall, except for field hockey, but they won both soccer, both volleyball, and both cross country state championships. They did an amazing job with the Special Olympics bowling tournament and came home with a handful of medals. My personal favorite here is the State Board of Education has 2 student members statewide, and one of those this year was Sabina Brochu from CVU. There's a strong history of volunteer work and fundraising. Here they highlight the $7,000 that 61 students slept out for as part of the Spectrum Youth and Family Services Sleep Out. I'm sure there's somebody here who has a child on the Penguin Plunge team. How much money did they raise this year? 150, 200,000? Anybody? Your kids didn't do it? No? Anybody? But it's an amazing number. I think it's the largest amount of money raised by a student group of the Penguin Plunge. So that's the update of what goes on in the school. If you don't have a kid in the school, it's hard to keep this to get this information. As I said again, there's so much going on, and there's lots of great work coming out of both schools. So as we move into the budget, we look at some of the assumptions that we had when we started. We have a salary assumption in there as we go into negotiations with the teachers union. We had a 13% increase in health insurance costs. We have used New England indicators for cost of living for utilities and fuel. We know that tech centers are going up the cost of those are going up 5%. We have increased workers' comp expenses, and then the schools are having trouble getting and retaining active subs, and so we had some increases in those costs. So one of the big drivers of cost is how many teachers that you employ. And I think what this shows you is that when we look at class sizes and student to teacher ratios, from kindergarten to 8th grade at SCS, well, these are just the CVSD numbers, but I think SCS is right in there. In these ranges, we're on the upper end of these ranges where we're staying below 20, but up towards 20 as an average. And, there's a large debate about where student to teacher ratio lies and how that affects learning. I know that it's an active thing that Scott and his team look at, and we're seeing success with the numbers that we have right now, and it's a good balance of how to efficiently deliver education and how to efficiently address each individual's needs. The other side of class size is the actual number of students that we have in the district, and that's the next slide here. I know statewide, there's a lot of talk of how enrollment numbers are way down. Now you can see on this slide, in the past 5 years, there's been a drop of 70 students overall, 70 to 80 students overall from the projected numbers, 63 from the actual numbers. these numbers are much smaller than they are statewide. So yes, you do see them coming down. It does vary, there is noise. But these numbers of seeing a decrease of 3.4% are the kind of thing we see with people moving in and out of the district, and not a drastic reduction in student numbers like you see outside of Chittenden County. If you look at the district as a whole, on the next slide here, you can see that over the total number of students, where we're talking about 3,800, we're pretty close to where we were 5 years ago, because there's growth in other towns, while maybe in Shelburne over those 5 years there has been that reduction in 60. But overall, you can see that our enrollment as a district is remaining relatively steady. The next chart is looking at enrollment by school. This is, again, a little bit of an eye chart, but it is interesting that Shelburne is seeing probably one of the biggest differences over the 5-year span of a loss of 70, whereas all the rest are very close to 10 to 20. And it's easy to look around and see where there's lots of building in Williston, there's lots of building in Shelburne as well. As we look at how enrollment changes in town, I would like to remind folks that there was a period of time where we took out 20,000 square feet of the school and put the rest of the school in the remaining area while we did our renovations. So, and we were able to house almost everyone with satisfaction while we were doing that renovation. There is a lot of, I wouldn't say extra space, but there's a way to add a significant number of students to Shelburne and not have to change our school configuration as it is right now. And I say that only because there's new developments going in on Spear Street and new talk of other developments around town. So here is my graph that's really like Lee's tax chart. But what you see here, the general colors are green would be Shelburne Community School assessment results for both math and English language arts. They alternate by sets of columns. Like the first column is English language arts, the green is Shelburne, and the blue is the state average. And these are assessments from 3rd through 8th grade. And this is the new SBAC test, new. This is what replaced the kneecap. Yes, all of our results are beating the state average. Many of these results show bigger differences. There are differences from grade to grade, and that's because there's certain things that we teach in our curriculums that don't necessarily match up with what is specifically assessed in the SBAC test. And so that's why there are certain differences. Our kids are achieving, and they're showing great results, I would say. The next slide shows one of the only assessment results that we get from CVU, which is assessed at grade 9, which is math and English language arts, ELA. Both of those are above average, and you can look at the absolute numbers, and again, those absolute numbers change based on different curriculums that different schools teach. But I would say that we are doing a great job of preparing our kids, and it isn't necessarily all about assessment, and that's you know, as I said, when you go to CVU and you go at graduation, there's a lot more there than SBAC results. So the next slide here just shows our year-round budgeting process. There is a lot of evaluation of quarterly financial results. I'll look at needs that staff and admins come to the board asking, you know, for increased services that they can deliver or increased staff that they need. And that happens all throughout the year. We will finish our budgeting process hopefully tomorrow and immediately start assessing needs that came up during this budget and start figuring out how we can work those things into next year's budget. And it is truly now a year-round process because it's done by the consolidated district, and it's much more consistent, and it's much clearer to assess the budget when you're not talking about, oh, I can make a difference if I reduce the spelling bee in this year, and then to move that $3,000 over here. There's much more ability to leverage resources across the whole district when doing this budgeting, and it makes a big difference. Our board budget goals throughout this process have been to support the implementation of the mission and vision that I explained in one of the earlier slides, to meet or exceed the educational quality standards, which are things such as class size and achievement, to implement key initiatives that Scott and other staff have requested, and implement and continue to improve the budget process, and including focus on community input that you as citizens, when you identify needs and how we can respond to those. And most importantly, all of this at a cost the community will support, and we don't forget that. So if we move to the budget numbers, for this year we are proposing a budget of $82,398,769, which that top line budget number is an increase of 4.4% from last year. The cost per equalized pupil is $16,585, which is an increase of 3.2% from last year. This budget includes these personnel changes, where we have reductions due to kindergarten and first grade class size outlooks in ABS in Allenbrook School and the Shelburne Community School for paras. We've also removed three. Yeah, okay. I thought it was a reduction, but the negative is on the right side there. So there's 3 non-teaching positions that are being removed at CVU. At the same time, we've lost some federal support for early literacy throughout the district, so we're adding 1.5 full-time employees for that. We're looking at essential arts and STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math support throughout all of the schools, and we're adding 1.5 staff across the district to support that, or 1.8, sorry. We're adding behavioral specialist in Heinsberg Community School. We're adding a CVU guidance counselor. We're adding 1 more member to the CVU leadership team, and then adding grant-supported positions for SEL is social emotional learning. Is that correct? Yep, social emotional learning support programs throughout the district, and middle school SAP. Again, what was SAP again? I forget. Substance abuse. Is it substance abuse? Oh, I thought it was something different. Sorry. Okay. And then adding a part-time bus dispatch. Now, one of the questions I've gotten throughout this process is about adding guidance counselors and leadership admin to the CVU team, which don't look like those are direct teaching positions. But a few years ago, positions were removed from admin at CVU because they were projecting a reduction in class size, overall students, I should say. And that has not worked out favorably because the student population has not decreased to the amount that was estimated, and the leadership team right now does not have enough resources to adequately assess and evaluate and really sort of understand the student population until something goes wrong. So right now they're putting out fires and attending disciplinary hearings rather than understanding students and trying to guide students. And like it says guidance counselor, but I had a good explanation for this earlier, but I'm losing it right now. But it is much more difficult to be a student in the school, and teachers and admins and guidance counselors want to work with the students in a proactive manner and not after the fact when something goes wrong. And so what these positions are doing is trying to add this proactive capability to the high school staff. So in operations, another part of the budget, for facilities, most of this is increases in electricity and fuel costs. Transportation, we're adding staff for the dispatcher as previously mentioned. Food service, we're continuing to work on balancing the offerings available to students for healthy food, and then balance that with cost efficiency. I think the days of thinking that our food service was a profit generation source are gone. It's more about now providing healthy food to kids that need it, both for breakfast when the kids arrive and also at lunch. I think they've made great strides in this past year. I think that was how I initially met Ken, and then ultimately roped him into becoming a school board member because he came and was on a committee of small committee that was campaigning to try and improve the quality of food at the schools. And so this has been, I think this year there has been good progress in the food service. Technology, again, it's all about ongoing security and privacy initiatives, updating equipment, and then also providing security and redundant internet infrastructure so that if there is an emergency, the school is still able to function from a computer standpoint, because we all know how much that is now tied into our teaching methods. The big factors driving, if we go to the next slide, the big factors driving the cost increase that go into the 4.4% increase from 82 million. Number one is the contractual salary obligations that we have, but something we really just can't control, and only a close second is was that 13% health insurance premium increase. And it's just staggering to me to see that while health insurance is only a portion of the cost of an employee, it's equal to the increase in salary costs that we have for the year. I know the governor has put some programs in place to try and get cost out of our healthcare system for the school teachers and staff. That goes, we just finished the negotiation, or the state just finished the negotiation on how they're going to implement that, and then we're going to try and work those directions into our next contract with the teachers, which we're negotiating currently. Other increases, big increases, are special ed costs, district initiatives, like I mentioned before, with early literacy, social emotional learning, and STEM. Tech center tuitions have gone up, which was the 5% we mentioned earlier on. Educational supplies, other benefits outside of health insurance, and then debt service across the district for bonds that we have out for the Shelburne upgrade, as well as the Williston upgrade that completed last year. So as we get down to the end of this, we'll just run through the tax calculations quickly. The overall budget is 82 million, but we also receive $13.1 million in revenue from the state and federal government for various activities, be it grants, special education, and other items. So our total net spending, which we need to raise from taxes, is $69.2 million. When you take that net spending number and you divide it by our equalized pupils, which you will see if you remember a few slides back, we have around 3,800 students, but our equalized pupils are 4,176. That number is larger because it recognizes that certain students in the district cost more than other students. It's a different cost to educate a kindergartner than it is to educate a high schooler. And so that is factored into our student population, and the state gives us our equalized pupil number. You divide those two numbers and you get our spending per equalized pupil of $16,585, which is up 3.2% over last year. The yield number of $10,883 is a number we get from the tax department, which is what a dollar of the entire grand list on the state would raise for education. So our district spending adjustment, which translates directly to the tax rate, is the spending per student divided by the yield rate, which comes up with your equalized homestead rate of $1.52. Since we did do our consolidation, we still have a phased in incentive where there was a 10 cents, 8 cents, 6 cents, and now 4 cents discount on your tax rate. So our adjusted equalized tax rate is $1.48 for the whole district prior to CLA. And I don't really like this graph, so we're going to go straight to the next page. And so what this shows is for Shelburne, you know, our equalized tax rate is $1.48 here. You divide that by our CLA, which basically tells us how far are we away from the assessed values based on market values. As this number goes below 100, what that means is that properties are selling for more than their assessed value. And so that is corrected. And so our tax rate with CLA applied is $1.60, which is a 5.1% increase. So your change in taxes per 100,000 assessed in Shelburne is $77. So while we do understand that a 5.1% increase probably wasn't what everyone was looking for, and a 4.4% increase in the overall budget, the governor put out guidelines for what the tax commissioner saw was going to be what on average would happen throughout the state. And while we didn't try to meet this and guide our budget to meet the numbers that the state wanted us to beat, we are ahead of all the statewide assumptions, where our growth in ed spending is only up 4% versus a state assumption of 5%. Our equalized pupils are up versus a statewide assumption of it being down. And our growth in spending per equalized pupil is up 3.2% versus a 5.53% expectation across the whole state. So to end this, I'll just walk through the articles that you will see on your ballots tomorrow if you haven't already voted early. Article 7 is the budget, which asks you to approve a budget of $82 million for the school district. Article 9 is the bus purchases, where we are purchasing 3 full-size buses, or 2 full-size buses and 1 special services bus. Now these are the budget we have here is going to cover the cost plus grants for 2 new electric buses. These are the first 2 that we're going to have in our fleet. It's been a question that we've been asked for many, many, many years. And so it is good to finally be able to present a program where we will be able to do that. Electric buses are very expensive relative to a diesel bus, and so what we are showing on this article is the cost to purchase 2 diesel buses, and then the grant that we received will cover the difference between the electric bus and the diesel bus. And that applies to the 2 full-size buses. Article 8 is the fund balance. Every year we have been lucky enough to finish positive to our budget numbers and have a fund balance. It's important to have some sort of balance to guard against any sort of unforeseen issue that happens throughout the year. If we suddenly need to pay out capital, if there was some incident in school where part of the building collapsed because of some force of nature, that's why we have this, to mitigate that risk. But we don't want that fund balance to get too large, and so every year we apply more and more of this to our budgets, and this year we're applying $725,000 of our balance to decrease the tax rate, and we will still have a $1.7 million balance to use in later years. Article 10 is titled Capital Maintenance, but this is a bond vote for facilities throughout the district. However, a majority of that is $4.5 million. This is a $6 million request. $4.5 million of that is for much needed improvements in the Charlotte Central School. The building is in, it has many phases of needed repair, not improvements, but repair. And this is the first step to that. And this is mostly roofing, exterior installation, and replacement of windows to start energy efficiency and overall just tightening up the building. Shelburne residents will see a part of this as upgrades to CVU for building repairs and grounds, and Shelburne is getting $380,000 to repair parking lots, and then also to upgrade the kitchen, which was something we couldn't fit into the bond vote, and so we finally received, I think it's about, well, we're getting $380,000 to include both of those, but a majority of that is the kitchen. I think I've explained sort of our need for the capital investment. What this slide really just goes through is that the district is on a multi-year plan to try and assess maintenance and upgrade requirements for the district. We don't want to ask for 17 million all the time. We want to do a bunch of smaller bond votes to spread out this investment over many years and reduce the just sort of keep it a consistent level of investment and not have it go up and down, and just really sort of plan the investments. And I really don't think that anyone from Shelburne would say, I'm only getting $380,000 of this $6 million. I don't think I want to approve this. I would only say that if there are people out there that feel that way, I would say that all of the members of the district are in this together, and we approved a bond to do much needed repairs to our school here. And while we didn't know this at the time, we now have the entire district of the 5 towns helping us pay for that bond. And I think it's only reasonable for the rest of the district to ask us to chip in and help them improve their buildings and bring them up to the same standard that we have. So I guess I talked a little bit about what the bond was going to go for. The next slide shows, these are the changes to Shelburne Community School, which would be the School Street parking lot and the kitchen mechanical upgrades. But, oh, I know what happened here. But if we get to the, this is an example of, this is an IR picture of the Charlotte School, where it's showing everything in yellow is all the heat just sort of pouring out of the building that they're paying for to try and heat the building. So they're trying to, in context of all the other slides in this initial presentation that they gave us, they're really just trying to insulate the outside of the building and try and prevent this sort of problem. But the next slide really, this $6 million bond, the effect on top of the current tax rate would be $10 per 100,000 of assessed value. So initially we had $77 per 100,000 for just the budget, and then this would add $10 on top of that, so a total of $87 per 100,000 if the $6 million bond and the budget were to pass. There is still the education property tax credit. That is still available. It used to be called income sensitivity. It's now called the property tax credit. There is a way to reduce your property tax through that. And my final slide is I encourage everyone to get out and vote on tomorrow on March 3rd if you haven't already voted early. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them.
Are there any questions for Mr. Connery? How you doing out there? All right?
Yeah, I'm just curious on the bus article. Is there any funding in there or it's required for any charging facilities for those?
Yeah, so the charging facilities are being provided by Green Mountain Power at no cost to the school district, which is key, and I'm glad you asked that question. That's you, David, right? Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on this other business? If not, thank you, Dave. No?
Hi, again, Jeff Loiter. Thank you, David, and everyone else for all the hard work on this. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the CVSD bond and how the repayment of that is distributed to the towns. Is it correct to say that the repayment of that is based on our contribution of students and tax dollars to the district, not based on the amount of that bond that's theoretically coming to Shelburne? And if that's true, is it also true that that has been the case in the past and will continue to be the case going forward?
So I think I understand what you're asking, and the bond will be repaid equally per student amongst the towns. So every town will pay based on their student population, similar to the way they pay into the budget. Per year, Tom reminds me. Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. Very thorough, as usual. We gave you the heads up earlier on that the town manager was going to have some short updates for this part of our meeting on stormwater management and the site analysis of the potential new fire rescue site and perhaps one or two other items. Lee?
Thank you, and given the hour, I will be very brief. Regarding stormwater, many people know this is a big issue driven primarily by state and federal mandates. I'm not going to go through a presentation this evening, but simply let you know that the Select Board is presently holding public hearings on a proposed stormwater ordinance that would create a stormwater utility, and the next hearing on that will be on March 24. With regard to the fire rescue property, that was a subject of discussion at last year's town meeting. I thought I'd just offer a brief update. We have been working diligently in partnership with Pizzagelli Properties, which would be the developer owner of the property that would be leased to Healthy Living, to do the site analysis to determine the feasibility of the prospective fire rescue facility. So far, all of those site analyses have indicated green lights. We have not found any problems yet with developing that site. We hope to go through permitting with the Development Review Board with the goal of finding out, can we actually get permits for the property under state and local permitting authorities. And if we are going to move forward, then as represented, we would propose a bond vote at the November election, no later than that. So far the analysis is looking good. Whether the voters would support the bond, whether that all happens, will remain to be seen. And thirdly, not wanting to end on a negative note, but everyone has seen the news lately worldwide about coronavirus. I just want to let everyone know we are monitoring that carefully every day. I've initiated a meeting that will happen later this week with municipal managers throughout the county, the health department, emergency management directors, just to talk about what things are looking like, what are we seeing, and if needed, can we create a mutual aid system between municipalities, similar to how we do that now in the fire service, in case one town needed help from another crew to keep their wastewater plant going, or highway or police. So we're monitoring it. We'll keep the community informed as best we can. The best information I've been able to find that's clear and rational, there's a World Health Organization website dedicated to coronavirus. Be glad to send that around or post that on Front Porch Forum. But we're monitoring carefully. We'll keep everyone informed. Thank you all.
Thank you. Is there any other business you'd like to bring up at the meeting? If not, I'd entertain a motion to recess the town meeting until 7 a.m. tomorrow, Tuesday, March 3, for the Australian balloting. Is there a motion? Seconded? It's been seconded. Will you debate it? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. The ayes have it, and you have recessed the meeting until tomorrow morning, Tuesday, March 3 at 7 a.m. Thank you.